This is a demo video on how to make a cone and a cylinder. So you're going to start off by using a slightly stiffened slab. Not like we used for the square. You are going to cut out your template of your circle and your rectangle. The rectangle can also be used as one side of a cubical rectangle instead of using it for a cylinder. Just then ball up your scraps, wrap it in plastic, and save it for later. Now just carefully transfer your now newly cut slabs onto a board. Be very careful because they can stick and rip, so be very gentle picking them up. And then put your stencil back on the top. Use a rolling pin and kind of roll it out just ever so slightly. You're just wanting that tar paper to stick back to the clay. And make sure it's centered and even. You will have a little excess, but we'll cut that off later. Set that up, stack them, and set it to the side. After they're stiffened up, use your X-Acto knife to cut off any excess that you've had. Around the circle and the rectangle. Here we're going to use that circle to make our cone. So we're going to make a dot in the middle, just kind of piercing it just to mark that center, and then you're going to go straight out to the edge. Peel it up very carefully. Again, it can rip, so be very gentle. And then you're going to fold it over until you get the appropriate size cone that you want. And that is width and height. And then you're going to just cut off any excess. You will want to leave a little bit of overlap. I like to leave a quarter to a half an inch of overlap. Once that's done, go ahead and set that to the side to stiffen up further. And you're going to do pretty much the same thing with the cylinder. You're going to cut off that excess of your rectangle. It sticks a little bit, but just cut that off, set it to the side. Then you're going to peel it up. On this one, though, I keep that tar paper on the back. The tar paper is kind of stuck to it, and that allows me to have a little bit more of a structure when I go to form it. So you're going to bevel it just like you did your cube. So bevel one in, but instead of beveling it both ways, you're going to have it going the same way. So one way is going at that angle, and then the other is at the exact same angle. This is going to allow you to have enough clay, and then you're going to overlap it so you don't have a thick spot on your wall. And you can see there, that one's going that way and then that way. And then you're going to slowly use that tar paper stuck to the back and curve that in. You're going to slip and score both of those edges, just like you would on anything else. A little bit of water. And then you're going to slowly pinch those two together. And you see how they kind of overlap. It's like almost like a tongue and groove a little bit. One is just going to slot into that other angle. And just slowly work this. Don't rush it. Use that tar paper and get that over. And then use your finger and kind of press it down. But my finger didn't fit. So what I did was I used one of my trimming wood tools. And I just used that. You can use a dowel rod, a spoon, anything that can get in there. Your stick tool, get in there and smooth that seam out on the inside. This is key. Then take your tar paper off, and there you go. You have a cylinder. Use your metal rib with the rounded end always, and kind of smooth that out a little bit. I'm using very little pressure. You don't want to deform your cylinder at all. Okay. Now, once you have those two, you can set your two aside to stiffen up even further. Once they've stiffened up further and you have a somewhat leather hard stiffened slab, you're going to then cut your flat ends. So what I'm doing is I'm using my needle tool just to mark the edge. And then I'm going back and I'll use my needle tool, or you can use your X-Acto knife to cut that all the way out of that slab. And then there I go. Set that aside, put your cone part on top of it to let it set up even further. This is a very do something, then wait a little bit, do something, and then wait a little bit process. And now I'm going to then just use the top and bottom and needle tool, just kind of stencil that in, just drawing around it. And then do the same thing on both sides. Make sure you don't just make 2 of your tops or 2 of your bottoms, because one side could be a little bit different than the other, and you want them to fit up pretty well. And I use my X-Acto knife to cut those out as accurately as I can. Once you're done with that, you can place those to the side with your tube on top and bottom. Make sure that they fit. If they don't fit, you can always cut another one. Now, I am just going to slip and score. And I'm going to do the exact same thing that I have been, slipping and scoring both ends, put water on, and then score again. So there's the water. And I'm just going to use my palette wood tool just to tap that down ever so slightly. Don't press too hard, especially if your cylinder is a little softer than ideal, because you could crush your cylinder or deform it. So be very gentle taps. And then you're going to do the same thing to the top. Now you're going to kind of jiggle that in, wiggle it so it's stuck, and then tap it. And then I kind of go around and then I just compress that seam with my fingertips. And then I can use the paddle to pat the sides and kind of get that even. Once that's done and the seams are smooth, use your metal rib, again, round it in, and just smooth that out. To compress those seams, to get rid of any excess slip or anything that kind of squeezed its way out in the compression. Just smooth that out. And then we can, again, refine this later like we did our spheres. Don't forget to poke a hole in it, just like anything. We're creating a bubble. And now we're going to do the exact same thing with the cone. But now I have this overlap in my cone. So I'm just going to, while it's still a little soft, just smooth that out with my finger. And then I will use a metal rib to smooth it out even further and compress that seam. Okay, make sure that's even. And then while supporting with my hand on the inside, I'm going to do this exact same thing on the outside. Smooth it out with your rib, compressing it. And now it's ready to be slipped and scored to its base. I let mine set up a little bit further. I noticed my cone was a little soft, so I let it set up for another 10-15 minutes without any plastic or anything on it. That way it's a little bit more rigid and allows me to manipulate it without deforming it. So again, slipping and scoring. Don't never forget to slip and score. Doing both sides. Oh, drop my tool. And again. And then this time you're just going to set it on, get it centered, make sure it's centered, and then kind of pat it down. I use my wooden palette tool to kind of tap that into place. And then I'm going to use my metal rib to smooth that up and into the form. You can see I have a little bit of a flange that I'm then going to smooth up. And then scrape to the sides, and you just want to really work that seam so the seam completely disappears into the form. Once that's done, use your wooden palette tool just to tap that into shape. And you can see here that it has the air trapped inside, but it's creating somewhat of a rounded edge. You can see there. I want that to be nice and straight. So I'm going to poke a hole in it and then go back to paddling. And by paddling, it's going to release some of that air and create that nice straight angle that I want. And again, we can refine this even more once it's stiffened up further. But again, smoothing it out with your metal rib. And then once you have all 3 shapes done, you need to make 3 of each. 3 cylinders, 3 cubes, and 3 cones of different sizes.